I was the product of their affair. My mom was ashamed of me. My siblings thinking I was the reason for them have a broken family.
But my dad, there was just hardly any contact. I never heard him tell me he was proud of me. Didn't come to most of my ball games, or I was in music in high school, and that wasn't his thing either. So kind of felt like I was a disappointment to him.
But my parents also addicted to the gambling.
For a guy who only had 2 traffic tickets in his whole life, going to jail was not me. It was the worst experience of my life. That was my bottom. Yeah, that was definitely my bottom.
In the car, I talked to God. I said, okay, I'm going to try your way, but I give you 90 days. You only have a 90 days. If things not happen, I'm out of here.
So you gave God an ultimatum.
Yes.
Have you ever packed a large suitcase, taken a trip, worn your clothes, got them dirty, sweated in them, used them, and then packed them back in the suitcase along with your clean clothes that you didn't use? What happens when you arrive back home? Open the suitcase. Have you ever noticed the smell? It stinks, doesn't it? And not just the dirty clothes, but the clean clothes too. The smell is transferred all through the suitcase. Now, think about your life and all the baggage from your past that you carry with you through your life. Now think about your marriage. You have baggage and your spouse has baggage. Some of that baggage smells and it contaminates your marriage. Sometimes it causes all kinds of wreckage. How do we deal with all that stinky baggage? How do we heal from the pain that baggage causes? Not only us, but the people around us. These are the questions that I want to ask our guests today as they share their life change story with us. I'm Eric Hutchinson, and this is the If Nothing Changes podcast. So, hey, friends, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the listeners who you are?
Hey, Eric, thanks for having us. I'm a blessed believer in Jesus. I have struggled with fear, anxiety, anger issues, and chemical addictions. My name's Steve.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Steve. Hi. Good to see everybody in the air. And I'm grateful to believe in Jesus Christ. I struggled with fear, anxiety, pride, and shame. And my name is Annie Hopkins.
Well, hi, Annie. Hi, Steve. And thank you guys so much again for coming on the podcast today. I'm really excited about sharing your life change story with everyone. And Annie, I'm going to start with you because if there's a listener listening, they could tell whenever you started talking that you're not from Arkansas. And I can tell you that I want to hear where you're from. Where were you born? Tell us a little bit about your family. You know, did you have any siblings, you know, and your mom and dad? Just tell us a little bit about your youth.
Sure. I was born in Taiwan, and I grew up in Taiwan. All together, including me, we have 7, I'm number 6. But there are 5 of them from my mother's previous marriage. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, yes.
Did you all live together in the same household or not?
No, when I grew up, when I was born, the oldest one was 20 years older than me.
Wow.
Yeah, so
quite a bit older than you.
Yeah, they have my parents has quite a big story over there too. Yeah.
Wow. So in Taiwan, now I don't know a lot about Taiwan, but I'm sure that they have differences in their culture and probably some of their beliefs and that sort of thing. How are things different in Taiwan than over here in America? So when you were growing up, I mean, you know, kids here in America grow up differently than what I'm sure you grew up. What were some of the differences?
Okay, so the big differences is when I grew up in Taiwan is more, we be taught that if we want to be successful, it's money, power, and status. So study harder can change your life because a lot of people from Taiwan, actually, they were migrant from China in the after World War II, the revolution. So a lot of immigrants from China to Taiwan, they came with nothing. So they want their second generation to be changed through the education, through earning a lot of money, And so that's how I learned there was only one way to success is to have a lot of money.
Is the work ethic a little bit stronger in Taiwan than it is over here, maybe?
Yeah. And then work is the life.
How about school? Do they go year round there, or do they have summer breaks? And
They
that
do
sort of-
have a summer break. They do have a winter break, and but there was a lot after school program just to get the kids ahead.
So what was it like growing up in your family? So you had you said there were 7, but your oldest was 20 years older than you, so
Right.
maybe he moved out or something, I don't know. But tell me, what was it like? Did you have a good relationship with your siblings, with your brothers and sisters, or did you guys fight like cats and dogs?
So my situation is a little bit different. My mom had an affair with my dad before she divorced to her ex-husband.
Okay.
So she found out she was pregnant with me. So she ran away with my dad. And then so she's always has this guilt to other siblings that she left behind. So, and also I was the product of their affair. So I got lots of blame. My mom was shaming me. My siblings thinking I was the reason for them have a broken family. So I didn't understand when I was growing up why they always pick on me, why my mom has distance, always showing the distance. I didn't feel love from my mom or my dad. And after I know the story, now I understand. Yeah.
So did you have a younger, or were you you said you were number 6, so there
Right.
was someone that
There
was
was a
younger.
younger, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I
How
had-
was that relationship?
With the younger sister, I always jealous to her because she got all the attentions, and also she has a better relationship with the elder siblings. Yeah.
So was there any religion in your family at all, or was God not even a part of your family?
There was Taiwanese has a lot of gods there. So yeah, there was a Buddha, there was some Taoism, there was a Macau. So yeah, we don't have, when I grew up, we didn't have a one religion. There was multiple religions. Whatever they can make a wish to get their fortune. So, and then also fortune tellers, and they also do a lot of fortune tellers. Yeah.
What did your mom believe?
My mom believed Buddha.
Buddhist. Mm-hmm. So, what was it like growing up in school? Did you guys, whenever your mom had you into your family, did you guys stay in one house all the way through your adolescence, or did you move around?
We stay in one house, but my parents also addicted to the gambling. Yeah, so my dad actually had a really good job with government. He was a government officer, but in my memory, there was a lot of times we will run out of money, not even the month's end. We ran out of money because the gambling issue. They lost again, and then there was a lot of fighting, conflict in our family. And when they lost the money, they also lost their temper too. And I became some place for them to get out their anger. Yeah, so there's some physical abuse and verbal abuse when I grew up. Yeah.
Wow.
I think there was a lot of guilt and shame in her because the affair. So she used the gambling to numb those feelings. Yeah. And she's always overcompensate to my elder siblings, those 5s. Yeah, she wanted to do more for them.
So I know by the way you introduced yourself, and I know you, that you are a Christian now.
Right.
Was there any God? Can you look back and see where God was working in your life then, or was that way later in your life?
So there was an interesting story. When I was 5, there's a missionary in our area, and I went to the Sunday school there. And that was the first time I felt about Jesus, and I felt the love However, we moved away, and then so that stopped. Yeah, we moved away, and I forget about all that until I moved to U.S., moved to Northwest Arkansas in 2009.
So tell me, what were the circumstances in which you moved to the United States? And was Arkansas the first place that you moved, or did you move around after you came to the States?
So there was another story about myself. I grew up in this dysfunctional family. When I couldn't get a love from my parents, I was seeking love from outside the family. So I fell in love with men that I thought it was my lifesaver. And I got married with this man and his family. And then in Taiwan, the culture is different. If you were the firstborn son, that you obligated to live with your parents. And then so I live with his parents, and they're a very powerful family, much wealthy than my biological family. So they look down to me because I'm from lowercase to marry up to them. There was a lot of conflict between my mother-in-law and me, my ex-mother-in-law and me, and she's the matriarch of the family. And there was a lot of conflict, put my ex-husband in the middle, and then he finally had an affair, and I decided that's it. I decided that's enough, and I want to get divorced. So I had asthma, and they sent me my ex-husband and my mother-in-law. They took me to ER, and they drove me there, and they just dropped me there and left.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was it. That was it. I felt like they don't treat me as a family.
So was that in Taiwan?
That was in Taiwan.
That was in Taiwan. So what was the circumstances that got you into the United States?
Walmart. My job, yes. And then I was working for Walmart. They're buying office in Taiwan, and I got an opportunity to move to U.S. to work in the U.S. And then I thought that was my opportunity to gain the wealth, to gain the power, so I could went back to Taiwan to fight for my son, to get him here. Yeah.
So you have a son.
Yeah,
as
I had
well.
a son. Yeah.
So, and that was from your ex-husband, correct?
Yes, correct.
So how old is your son now?
26.
Okay. So whenever you came to the States, how old was he?
He was 5.
So he was young.
Yeah, he was very young. Yeah.
So what did all of that tell Annie about herself?
I was the failure, and I was the terrible mother, and my marriage was terribly falling apart, and I would never be success, and I came from a broken family, and that's my destiny.
So I'm going to push a pause button on you first, and I'm going to move over to Steve. But why don't you tell us where you grew up and a little bit about your family?
Okay. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio in the 1950s. Times were a lot different than they are now. My experience in growing up is really a lot different than Annie's, which plays a role in our story. So I had one brother, older, and my parents, and we had a pretty normal family early on when I was small. We went to church. My mom was a spiritual leader. My dad went to church. He was, in my early years, we all went to church every Sunday. But my mom was my spiritual foundation in my life. And so about when I was in the 4th grade, things started changing in my house. It got very dark. I didn't understand it because I was so young, but I've figured it out since then. My dad was dealing with a lot of similar issues I deal with: anxiety, fear, and he had a major depression problem. And my dad only had a 10th grade education, so he always felt everybody was looking down at him, but it wasn't true. I mean, he was a very strong person, man, and people looked up to him, but he just didn't see it. And so the depression really took hold. He had to be admitted to a psychiatric ward for a while, and back in those days, they used the electric shock treatments, and I didn't understand that. I was too young, but I could tell everything was different because we were being taken care of by friends and neighbors for a while just to stay out of the line of fire, I guess. And even when he came out of the hospital for a long time, it was really difficult in our household. There was a lot of stress and fighting, and it wasn't that my mom and dad were fighting each other. It was my mom trying to console him because of his stress issues in regards to his work, and he was a very responsible man. He took care of us. That was his goal in life, was to take care of us, but it became so overwhelming to him because of his insecurities, and my mom was always trying to point out, the truth that he didn't see, and he would argue back. And as a child, and our house was small. It was only like a 750 square foot house, and I would lay in my bed at night, almost every night, with my stomach hurting and shaking, and I'd get up in the morning, and I would have this fear of just walking into the day. I think those issues developed my fear issues for my life. As I worked through these issues, this was what caused the start of my fear and anxieties and low self-esteem issues. During that fourth grade time period, fifth grade, I fell behind because of I couldn't focus. I got distracted with home issues. I couldn't focus. And before that, I did well in school. It was easy for me. And after that, I felt like once I got behind, I felt like everybody else was ahead of me. And then that worked against my low self-esteem issues. And it was a vicious circle. And it just continued. Junior high school was horrible. Went into 10th grade, and it was pretty bad too. But I finally decided I've got to do something here. And I started taking control of things. I figured out how I could get around some of these feelings of insecurity by controlling events around me. So I became very controlling about everything, including other people. My relationship with my mother was really good. I mean, we were close through her whole life. We could talk about things that I couldn't talk about to anybody else. I really appreciate that. And but my dad, there was just hardly any contact. I never heard him tell me he was proud of me, or I knew he loved me because of the way he took care of us and sacrificed himself, but never said the words. And didn't come to most of my ball games, or I was in music in high school, and that wasn't his thing either. So I always felt like, kind of felt like I was a disappointment to him a bit. And interestingly, as I got older, got married, and got into my career, and I started traveling to Asia for my work. And the first time I ever felt like he was proud of me was when I called him from Korea the first time. This was back in 1985 when you didn't have cell phones. You could barely get through. It was awful back in those days. But I could tell in his voice that he was really excited and proud of me for the first time out of all those years. And, I appreciated it, but he had changed too. He became a much softer and gentler person, a more secure person by then.
So you mentioned that when you were young, that your mom had you in church whenever the doors were open and that stuff. So did you have a God experience as a young person, and did that follow you into adulthood as you went to college and so forth? Did you maintain that? Would you say that you became a Christian as a young person, or was it later?
When I was about 15 in junior high school, I had a older friend who was a very strong Christian, and he took me to a Baptist church, and they had an altar call, and I went up. And that was probably when I really started down the real road of making that real decision for myself.
Okay. So whenever you were in college and even into your career, did you continue to go to church? How was your relationship with Christ at that point?
When I was in college, I was kind of drifting. I was definitely drifting. And right out of college, I got married. We tried different churches. She was kind of came from the same background, from kind of a very vanilla type of church service as well. And so we didn't have this really strong foundation. I didn't feel, but we knew that we probably should go to church. And then we found a church and we got involved, and it was Presbyterian, and we both got involved in the music program. I started teaching. That was very out of character for me, very out of character. And I thought, what am I going to do? I don't know anything about the Bible that much. And getting up in front of people and trying to teach people was not in my wheelhouse at all, period.
So you got through college, and you got a job, and you were already married.
Yes.
Right. So started doing some traveling with your job and that sort of thing. So what happened with the marriage with your first wife?
Well, we had 2 children. I have 2 daughters. They're in their 40s and now. So we were married 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yep.
So how did what was the straw that broke the camel's back on the marriage?
First of all, I want to make clear that I take full responsibility for the things that happened, because I didn't go to God and let him work out the issues that was between my wife and I. And I tried to do it myself. The mistake I made there was, with my ex-wife, was I didn't put the effort into her that I should have. And I didn't go to God and say, I'm having these feelings or not feelings. I need you to show me, walk me through this and teach me. And I didn't do that. And that was a huge mistake. I had an affair. It was me. I wanted out.
Okay.
I wanted to change my life.
Yeah.
And I did.
And where was God in all of that?
I was still going to church, still involved in different things, but it was almost like I had these 2 lives going on.
Yeah. So how was the divorce? Now, I've been divorced, and it was one of the worst things in my life that happened. Was it a messy? Was it hard? Were your kids? How did they accept all of that? And
my girls were just very disappointed with me, and it just once that happens, it pretty much destroys a marriage.
Yeah. So
and that was 100% my fault.
So how's your relationship with your kids now? Are they still? Is it all good?
We are very close now, extremely close now, and there's a lot of love.
So, Annie, were you working at Walmart? That's where we kind of left off with you. And were you a vendor for Walmart, or were you working for Walmart as well?
I was working for Walmart. Okay. Actually, Annie and I knew each other for years prior to us getting together. She was in Taiwan. I was here. At the time, I was doing product development for a big company in the area. And obviously, Walmart, she's already mentioned that.
Yeah.
And so I would develop the product designs, and I would send them to her, and she would execute them into a sample over there, and she would be the negotiator with them, and did an outstanding job. So that's how we met.
So how did you guys start getting together as far as dating? And was it a long courtship, or did it happen pretty quick, or what happened?
Was it long? She thought it was long. I didn't think it was very long.
So what is long or short for either one of you? A year? Did you date for a year?
Yeah,
or was it?
Yeah, it was more than that.
More than that, yeah.
So.
When I first met Steve, fall in love with him was because I feel like he's a protector that I never had in my life. I see the discipline in him, the security that I never had in my life. So that attracted me. And I feel like someone who cared about me and protected me and treated me like a princess. And that was the strength and attribute to make me attracted to him. However, that was become obstacle and that was become something to bring the problem to our marriage too.
So you guys get married, and you both have been married before,
Right.
and you both have your own stuff, your baggage, the things that you're bringing in. So when was the honeymoon over? You know, they always talk about, hey, we had our first fight and a honeymoon. I mean, did you guys, were things cake and cookies for the first year, or did something happen quickly, or when did you start bringing some of these dysfunctions and baggage into it?
Probably the first after the first year.
First year.
Yeah. So I grew up in that dysfunctional family, and also my parents had never protected me. So I always have this trusting issue to the authorities. And Steve is he's older than me, and he's much protected. And then I love that, but I also resist that. And I want to have an independence in my life. And then also, I don't trust men. I didn't trust men. And I see my parents' relationship. My mom always hiding something from my dad, because if she didn't hide the money from him, he's going to lose it all, and we won't have any food on the table. So that's what I learned, that I will always have my safety money, my renting money hidden away. So it will be a challenge for me to tell Steve everything. And also that was a challenge for him, that he didn't feel the transparency between us. Yeah. And then later on, that protection become controlling to me, and I feel I'm suffocating in this relationship. I don't have any liberty, even go out by myself. Yeah.
So did you communicate that to Steve, or did you hold it in?
I hold it in until something happened, push the button, and I will blow up. I will blow up, and then we will get into the big fight. When we were together, we have a passionate, we're the best buddy in the world, and there was a lot of romantic between us. But when we fight, that was like cats and dogs too.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very intense. It was very intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Steve, why don't you comment? How was that? So after the first year, you get into a normal rhythm, but then there were started having some issues there?
Well, I brought in a lot of issues into the marriage. Obviously, I was still under a lot of stress, so I started taking a anti-anxiety medication, which I really didn't know a whole lot about, but found out later it was an addicting benzo.
Wow.
And that medication, I was always looked at, when I did things and said things, I always kind of looked at how's this going to affect the situation. That pill took it away. I didn't care. And that changed me. It changed me. And I didn't know that at the time. But that was one thing I brought into the marriage. But the controlling issue, my anger issues were also there. And when I couldn't control her, and she wasn't going to be controlled, so I met my match, let's put it that way. And I wasn't going to be controlled. She wasn't going to be controlled. And it really escalated by 2009, we were, the tension, and it was like she said, when things were good, it was really good. When things were bad, it was really bad. And you just can't keep going on like that. And in 2009, and at that point, I'd already started drinking alcohol too, because the stress of what was going on with us, the stress of what was going on with work, honestly, the guilt and shame of my divorce and the affair that I had was all playing into that, I believe. And so I started drinking alcohol because the benzo wasn't working as well as it was when I first started taking it. And I found out later, both of those things affect the same part of the brain. And it was like the double whammy. And when I was drinking alcohol, I was not Steve. I was somebody else. And so in 2009, it was in September, and we got into a huge fight. I won't. It doesn't. The details don't matter. But we got into a huge fight, and it escalated not only verbal, but it got physical. Neighbors called the police. They came, and I went to jail. And for a guy who only had 2 traffic tickets in his whole life, going to jail was not me. It was the worst experience of my life. That was my bottom. Yeah, that was definitely my bottom. So yeah, I ended up in jail. She bought a ticket to go back to Taiwan. Even transferred money already before I even got out of jail. I was only in there like one night, so that was bad enough. And interestingly, I was talking. The court wouldn't let me talk to Annie because of the situation, but I was talking to my daughter. My daughter Shelly said, "Dad, Annie's going back to Taiwan. You're not going to see her again." And I was devastated. Talk about the lowest point of your life. I mean, and you're in a place where you have zero control about anything, and it was really tough. And when I got out, she was still here, and I'll let her tell you exactly why she made the decision not to go at that point.
So all things happen, like flashback to me, my parents' marriage, my childhood, and also my previous marriage. And I just tell me, this is my destiny. And I'm broken. I am a broken person. I would never deserve a perfect marriage. So, it's probably better for me to live. Yeah,
So,
and then that's the only way I know how to resolve the problem is to run away from the problem.
but you didn't.
Right.
What changed your mind?
So that time, 2009, already very involved in the fellowship. And so I decided somehow God get a hold of me unconsciously. I didn't pray, but he got a hold of me unconsciously. So I decided to talk with pastors before I leave. And so I went to talk with Chips and Mark Schatzman. And then they knew, they were very understandable what happened. They were very understandable of the situation, and they gave me a lot of comfort. However, there was one question sticking me. So he said that, "Annie, did you try God's way?" I was like, "No." And so I decided, at that point, the rest of my life, I was running away from problem and try to resolve the problem by myself. So that time I decided I'd give God a try. And so I drove home. In the car, I talked to God. I said, "Okay, I'm going to try your way, but I give you 90 days. You only have 90 days. If things not happen, I'm out of here."
So you gave God an ultimatum.
Yes. Yeah, I was very elegant. I'm sorry. It was very elegant, and yeah.
So what happened? He comes home. You're still there, and
Well,
Steve, you said that you reached your low, and so what happened? You're there. I mean, where did you go from there?
Now, there was a restraining order, and that began almost a year-long legal situation.
Right.
And
Were you living apart?
We were living apart.
Okay.
And eventually, they allowed us to live back together, and it wasn't easy. At first, we still had, issues. I was still controlling, and, those things just didn't go away because I hit bottom. But it woke me up to start figuring out what went wrong and what I needed to do. And it became clear that, I needed to change. But God started speaking to me in a lot of different ways. Interestingly, I did a lot of things to try to get on the right path. I went to a chemical addiction facility, outpatient, did that for 6 weeks every night. And I was, obviously I joined Celebrate Recovery, which I wasn't sure what I was walking into at the time. I thought it was for hardcore drug and alcohol users, and it wasn't for me. But talking about perfect example of denial, that was me, definitely in denial. So Annie and I talked, and she said, "I want you to go," and I said, "Yeah, I need to go." And I also did some other things. We also got into counseling, personal counseling. I went. She was going by herself first while we were separate, and then I started going by myself for a while, and then we went to as a marriage counselor at Fellowship too. Really great organization, really helped so much. But I still had the controlling issues, and another thing that happened was it was really tough. It was the controlling, but it was also codependency issues too. I could not be separated from her because there was so much insecurity at this point about her leaving. Because every time we'd get into a fight, she would threaten to leave. She even had a go bag. So I found out later. I didn't know at the time. I would have probably hid that. But I was very insecure about that, and I just didn't want our marriage to end. I really wanted to make it work. I loved her, so I wanted to make it work, even though we had these differences. And but I kept pulling her back, and she kept pulling away. And God told me, He said, "You need to release her." And I started letting go, my controlling. And the more I let go, the closer she came.
So, Annie, tell me about, so as he starts realizing some of these things, when did you start realizing, what changed in you? Because, you had a to-go bag. So what started changing for you that you started thinking, okay, I need to start working on my issues? What were some of the things that you were struggling with that you learned?
So I started to think, is this for real? Or he just doing this to keep me? And if it's just changing from outside in, this won't last. And also at the same time, I took a month of absence from work. And in that month, I get close to God. I started to reading the Bible. I started to reading His Word. And He was showing me He sees everything. He sees me. He sees my childhood. He sees what struggle I went through. And He also showed me love. And I was reading that story about the sinful woman wash Jesus' feet with their long hair. I felt that was me. And I felt that alabaster jar with what I can offer to Jesus. I have nothing to offer. And my tear went up, and I felt God's love. I felt Jesus was holding me. And I smelled that perfume. And in the sunroom, I was alone there, and that wasn't my perfume. And that just God's promise. That just Jesus' commitment to me that He will never leave me and forsake me. I'm in His hand. And I just need to walk through the steps with Him. So it wasn't like switch turn on or turn off. It's a process. But I immediately felt Jesus, His love for me. And He's going to take me through this if I'm willing to. And I say yes. And then we started to go to CR. And of course, I started seeing my issues. And finding the security to, my security we talked about earlier, my security was money, power, status. And now my security is Jesus. So that totally changed me. And also see the different perspective of marriage. Marriage is not fulfill my need. Marriage is not to make my dream come true or help me escape my nightmare to a newer life. The marriage is what God created for one man and one woman, committed to each other and to live in the marriage life to glorify God. He made, how do I say this? He made our marriage like a new, and Steve treated me so well. He is the leader of the family, and he showed me what godly man is. I'm so grateful because it broke the chain. My chain was broke. And I'm not the victim of that broken marriage karma anymore. What is marriage about? It's about God is the center of this marriage. Yeah.
So what do you believe about yourself now?
I am a daughter of God. No doubt. Yeah. That's my true identity. Yeah.
Amen. Well, I agree completely with
Yeah.
that. Well, Annie, what would you tell a woman or anybody for that matter? What would you say to someone who says, I'm broken. I can't be fixed. There's nothing that can be done. And I'm in this pattern of unhealthiness. How do I get out of that? What would you share to the person that's in a bad place right now?
You know, when the situation looked like that really made us feel like there was no way out. And maybe there is no way out. However, there is one true God. When we cry out to him and he has a plan, it's like Jeremiah 29:11. Yeah, my plan is to give you hope and future. And just have to be willing to, and it might take a longer. It's just, willing is my decision, but rest is God's decision. I can say there is hope. However, maybe a lot of people in this situation, they will say, you don't know how bad it is. There's really no hope. I tried many times, but willing to trust God. And God always has a way too. Yeah, even I gave him the limitation for 90 days. He didn't strike me. He didn't put a lightning strike me. He took me through. But I want to say, when the situation looked like there was no way out, cry out to God, really cry out to God. And the only thing enemy come to get us is to isolate us, to let us think that is you. There is no hope. You are by yourself. You are alone by yourself, and nobody will understand you. That is a lie. That's a big fat lie that we need to break.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Good word, Annie. So, Steve, same question. What would you tell the person that's listening that's in a bad place right now?
You've got to surrender, number one. Surrender your situation to God, and then take action. Get involved. Get counseling. Get a home church. Get involved in a program like Celebrate Recovery. I had read an article about the survival of marriages based on circumstances like this. And our marriage rated a 2% survival rate. And God changed that.
Wow.
It's possible, and He does it.
Amen, Steve. Change is possible. Thank you guys so much for sharing your story with us. Hey, if you are listening today and the baggage from your past is stinking up your life and possibly the life of others around you, if you are struggling with your marriage and you think there is no hope, well, there is always hope through Jesus Christ, our higher power. And just as Steve said, the first step is surrender. And God is waiting for you to take that first step. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time.